بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا فعلمنا ولا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا ففهمنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا ورزقا حلالا طيبا يا أكرم الأكرمين وبعد. Last time was the first class of the Seerah class, the Seerah course covering the Meccan period of the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We gave an introduction about the Meccan society and the Arab society in general before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We talked about the main characteristics of the people at that time, the way the society was functioning at that time, the economical state, the religious state of the society. Very general overview of the society at that time, so we can understand deeply the context of the start of the da'wah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a map of the Arabian Peninsula before the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Talking in sort of detail about the main tribes, the main areas, the small towns and clans that were existing before that time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You need to know some of these names to be more familiar with the terms of the Seerah. Knowing Yathrib, knowing Medina, Hijaz, Jeddah, some of these different cities that the most of the events of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were happening around this area, with some sort of extension towards the Persian Empire, towards the Syria and the Roman Empire, and we talked about these two empires last time, and extending that to Egypt and some parts of Southeast Africa at the time. This is almost the same thing, but with more names of the main cities of the Arabian Peninsula at that time. So among the main information that you need to know is that from the south we have Yemen. So this is something that you need to know. And from the north we have Syria, and northeast we have the Persian Empire at that time. This is Islam, or the Muslim civilization, a while after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it extended from this small part from the Arabian Peninsula all the way towards most of the Persian Empire, most of the Roman Empire, and all the way to the west until Morocco, then Tunisia, and then Mauritania, and then parts of Europe at that time, which is kind of the south part of France and Spain. All this was included in the Muslim civilization after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Not so long time ago after the death of the Prophet, but the expansion was really fast, and this is a different part of history that we're not covering in this class, but this is the extension of the da'wah and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't know if you're more familiar with the Middle East map, you'll be very familiar with this map. This is basically most of the Middle East area, with some other parts. Of course, Islam extended more than this towards the east, in the subcontinent of India and Pakistan. Of course, all these countries, the Malaysia and Indonesia, and some of these countries, they're all majority Muslim countries, or some of them are majority Muslim countries. So Islam was not only limited in this area, but this is the first big extension of the deen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are all the way west, right? I don't know if you can visualize the map. We are all the way west after the ocean. The ocean is basically between us and this part of North Africa. And then we talked about the part of the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we said it's important to know some of the names of the grandfathers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you recall some of the names of the grandfathers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Yes. So what is the dad's name first? Abdullah. And Abdul Muttalib.
I don't know the rest, honestly.
So Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib. And then? So I need to set up the online stream, so I'm waiting for you to answer until I do that. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib, the second grandfather. We talked about him in kind of detail. He had important position. Yes? Hashim, that's right. Jazakallah khair. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim. And then? I heard a whisper of the name. Ibn Abd Manaf. Who said that? Oh, yeah, okay. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf. And then? Qusay. And then? Ibn Qusay. So we need one more name. Again, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Hashim ibn Abd Muttalib ibn Abd Manaf. Ibn Abd Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf. Ibn Qusay ibn... No, Adnan is all the way back. Ibn Kilab. So the first one in the long chain is Kilab. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abd Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf ibn Qusay ibn Kilab. At least until this name, you need to memorize. And again, it's not only for the sake of memorization. It's something that is really important for you to know about your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we talked about his family in general. We talked about Hashim and that he was responsible for feeding and providing water for the pilgrims or the Hujjaj at that time. And then we talked about Abdul Muttalib, and he had an interesting story that he inherited this position from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sorry, from his dad Hashim. And then there was a fight that his uncles tried to take that responsibility away from him, but he restored his right back through his uncles from his mom's side. And then he became the responsible for the siqaya and the rifada, for the providing water and food for the Hujjaj. And then we said two important things happened to Abdul Muttalib. That was the last thing we talked about last time. Two main incidents are very related to the name of Abdul Muttalib once we talk about him in the seerah.
He redug Zamzam water.
He actually digged the Zamzam water, or he redid it again. Because it was, of course, during the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then the well was gone for a while, and then he did it again. And when he was doing that, he found a lot of hard time from the people of Quraysh because of two main problems. The first problem, they wanted to dig it with him, and he refused. Because he saw a dream that he is commanded by Allah to dig that well. And then the second problem, part of the previous nations who came and tried to invade Mecca, they took over the place and they destroyed the Zamzam well, and they buried under that well a lot of their treasures before they left. So there were a lot of monuments and treasures, money and gold and a lot of stuff that they buried under the well. So when he digged, he found these treasures. And he said, I did this for the sake of Allah. These treasures are not the right of anyone. I'm just going to put them in the Kaaba out of respect to the command I got from Allah. But the people of Quraysh, they wanted to take these treasures and distributed them among themselves. And he refused to. They got in a big argument among each other. And that's why he had a lot of troubles. At that point, he felt so sad because he didn't have any sons to support him. He didn't have kids. So he made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, if Allah grants me 10 kids, I will slaughter one of them for his sake. That was the mentality. He said, if Allah, I don't have basically usba, I don't have people to support me, I don't have like sons to support me in this problem because people really abused him a lot. So he said, if Allah grants me 10 sons, I will slaughter one of them just for the sake of Allah in front of the Kaaba. This is what he did. And we'll get to that soon, inshallah. So this is the first thing that happened with Abdul Muttalib. Yes.
Wasn't he the one who, like one of the biggest witnesses of the field?
Yes. This is the second thing that is related to the name of Abdul Muttalib is the field, the incident of the elephant, as we call it. So what happened is that was, according to a lot of historians, during the month of Muharram in the Hijri calendar. In our calendar, it's more of these said it's February 571. That was the actual date of the actual year of the incident of the elephant. It was around 50 years before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what happened is there was a man, his name is Abraha or Ubraha. There's multiple ways of pronouncing his name. He was basically the viceroy of the Ethiopian king. The Ethiopian king was a Christian king, and he had deputies or people are viceroys who are basically the presidents or his representatives over multiple countries that he's ruling. One of those countries was Al-Yemen, and he was the viceroy of Al-Yemen at that time. And then he kept hearing about Mecca and about the Kaaba and why people are going to that place to perform pilgrimage. And we said pilgrimage was a ritual of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and the people of the Arabs used to do it maybe in different way. Some of the rituals are different that we're doing nowadays, but the concept of Hajj and Umrah was there. Of the pilgrimage, major and minor pilgrimage as we call them, or Hajj and Umrah, was one of the things the Arabs used to do. So he got very jealous because of this position that Mecca and Kaaba had. So he built a church in Sana'a. Sana'a is the capital of Yemen. It's still the capital of Yemen until nowadays. To attract the people of Hajj to go to Yemen instead of going to Mecca. So a man from an Arab tribe that is called Kinana, he heard of this and he understood the purpose or the goal of Abraha to do this. So he entered the church stealthily, as they say, at night, and he besmeared all the front wall with, with excrement. Just out of humiliating for that place that this person built. So when he found out Abraha about this, he got so angry. And he decided to go and destroy the Kaaba. So he took an army of over 60,000 soldiers just to go invade Mecca and destroy the Kaaba, just to get rid of this problem that is being caused to him. And he took elephants with him. And we mentioned that last time, the Arab are not really used to deal with elephants. And he took around 13 elephants. And he rode one of those, the biggest elephant of that, he was riding the elephant. And they kept walking until they reached a place that is called Wadi Muhassir. It's very close to Muzdalifah. If you went before to Hajj, these names will be familiar to you. It's between Muzdalifah and Mina, which is not really so far from Mecca, but it's almost close to the borders of Mecca at that time. Once they reached that place, the elephant he was riding, it knelt down. And he doesn't want to move anymore. No matter how much he pushes the elephant to move, it doesn't want to move. Every time he's trying to make it move towards the Kaaba or towards the Mecca direction, it will never move. Tries to move it any other directions, like north or south, the elephant goes smoothly, there's no problem. Then he tries again to push the elephant to move forward towards the Kaaba, the elephant doesn't want to move, and just it knelt down. And that was the first sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them. And by the way, according to a lot of historians, this elephant was named Mahmud. I don't know if you heard of this before. We used to think it's a joke, but it's actually as a kind of an historic, authentic evidence. Remember when I was very young, there was that very famous cartoon about this story. Yeah, right? Remember? Okay. So in that cartoon, they used to call it Mahmud, and I thought it's just like a cute way for the kids. And then when I grew up and I read more in the books of Sirah and history, actually a lot of historians, they said that was the name of that elephant. Which is not bad. If anybody's name is Mahmud, don't feel bad, because that was a good elephant, basically, because it didn't want to move towards the destruction of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when they started that place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent over them that punishment, as he mentioned in the Quran. وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. Allah loosed upon them birds in flights, hurling against them stones of baked clay, and made them like green blades devoured. This is the exact description Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. Those birds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent were like swallows and sparrows, like small birds and not really big birds. Each bird was carrying 3 stones. Each bird of them is carrying 3 stones, 1 in its beak and 2 in its claws. And then once they reached the army, they started just heading and throwing these stones on people. And whenever the stone touches one of the soldiers, it will cut his limbs. And it will burn him to death. And that happened to most of the army. Most of them actually were killed this way. They started scattering all over the place. They started running at random. But the birds got the majority of the soldiers and the army, and most of them were killed. Even Abraha himself, he got infection by by a small piece of these stones. He didn't die on the spot. He got infection because of that, and which caused his fingertips to be amputated. And then when he returned back to Sana'a, he died in the most humiliating way. And that was the punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for him. This incident, after it happened, it attracted the attention to Mecca big time among all the civilizations at that time. People started thinking more. Mecca was famous, but people started to think more like there was something special about that place. We talked about the Roman and the Persian empires last time. They started thinking more, why this place having all this significance? And at that time, the Persians, they moved right away and tried to take over Yemen, which is in the south, as we showed in the map, just to be careful, like what's going on. They need to get closer to this area of the Arabian Peninsula at that time. But people in general understood the concept of Al-Bayt al-Haram. There is a sacred place there. There is something that God has to do something extraordinary like this to protect his own house. One of the interesting things that happened, the people of Mecca, they heard about this and they said, Abraha is coming in a huge army. We cannot actually fight against the army. We cannot fight against 60,000 soldiers with 13 elephants. So the people left Mecca, they left the town and they went to the mountains waiting, they didn't know what is going to happen. Then Abdul Muttalib, because he was one of the men responsible for the Bayt al-Haram, for the Holy Mosque at that time, people told him, like, you gonna do something? He said, I have nothing to do. Then a while later, they came to him and they told him that on the way to Mecca, Abraha, this king, or the leader of the army, he found 200 camels that belonged to Abdul Muttalib. So he took them. So Abdul Muttalib got angry. He said, I'm going to him and I'm going to get my camels back. So when they went, some people met with him, they recognized that that's Abdul Muttalib. He told him, the king is so angry, so please do not talk to him. He said, no, I'm not going to go back until I take my camels. So they talked to Abraha and told him, you know what, that's a very respectful man. The society, people here in Mecca, they respect him, so you better meet with him. So when he met with him, he was so shocked that he came to negotiate about his camels, not about the camel. He said, are you coming here to talk about your camels? You're not scared about your sacred place? So he said, Ana Rabbul Ibn. He said, I'm the owner of the camels. But the owner of the house is Allah. That's why he said this very famous statement when he told him, Lil Bayti Rabbun Yahmi. He said, the word Rabb in Arabic language means the owner. So he said, Ana Rabbul Ibil wa lil Bayti Rabbun Yahmi. He said, I'm the owner, I'm the Rabb of my camels. But the house has a Lord, has another Rabb, has another owner that would take care of it. So out of the amazement of Abraha to that response, he actually returned the camels back to him. And then he left. He took the camel and said, he said, I'm sure that Allah will take care of this house. Those people are not Muslims yet, just to understand the situation. But they had that sense of the Godship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said, one of the versions of the story, they said he said a couple of poetry in a nice way, making kind of dua to Allah that we have nothing to offer, you please take care of your house. This is what he told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The story is a bit familiar to most of us. So I'm sure, all of us here heard of this story before, right? Most of us, or all of us, basically heard of the story of the elephant before. We all heard about the surah in the Quran, at least, Surah Al-Fil. It's a chapter that is called the elephant. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. So what we really want to do is we need to reflect a little bit deeper on this story. So I will share some reflections that I want you to think of a little bit in a deeper way. So the first thing is that this man, Abraha, was representing a Christian kingdom at the time. So basically, this man and his people were in general belonging to what we call the people of the book, right? They adopted a sort of monotheism, or a sort of iman, of faith, of an actual faith. Maybe we believe this faith was altered and changed after the Isa alayhi salam, but in general, they still considered to be the people of the book. The people of Mecca, they believe in no religion. They were pagans, right? They were just worshiping idols, rocks and stuff. So in our understanding, and maybe theoretically in the sight of Allah, who is better? A Christian person who has a sort of iman, even if there are some problems with this iman, or a person who is basically a mushrik, or a person who is taking other idols to be gods besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So generally speaking, would view the people of the book to be better. Even in our ahkam, in our rulings, even in fiqh, we view these people to be, of course, better than the pagans, right? But if you reflect on this story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supported the pagans against the people of the book. Right? This is what happened. Allah protected his book, destroyed the army. Protected his house, and he destroyed the army, and he supported the people who are basically worshipping rocks. And he gave them all the significance among the Arabs, and they became very famous afterwards, and gave more significance to the location of Mecca at that time. Why did this happen?
Isn't like the way that the people of the book view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of distorted? I feel like the mushrikun, they still have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a higher regard.
No, actually, the way at least we understand the aqidah is that no, the people of the book would be closer to those people. Because they still believe that God has the supreme power. And it's only one God in some sort of a way. But those people, they have hundreds of actual like rocks and wood and stuff that they made by their own hands, and they're worshipping, thinking that they're taking decisions and they give them rizq and they provide them with the stuff.
But isn't it that like they thought that these things were communication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Yeah, but it's their kind of shirk is much worse than the kind of other basically disbelieving creed of some people that view Allah in a different way. So one of our general rules in Aqidah is that the people of the book are closer than the pagans, right? So again, if you reflect on this, why would this happen? Yes?
I think because like he's an oppressor, although he's a people like from the book, like, people understand, but he's not doing the book itself. He's oppressing and he wants to like take or to put down the Kaaba, and the other they are oppressed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So the punishment of Allah was against oppression, more than the identity of the people who's doing it, right? Okay, so it could be that regardless of your faith, regardless of your iman, if you are involved in any kind of oppression, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might punish you, even if you're a Muslim, right? We can find Muslim oppressors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them. Maybe, I'm saying, maybe this is one of the reasons. Would there be any other reasons? Yes.
It's Mecca, it's a sacred place, and probably it's preparation for the coming Prophet Muhammad, just give more status to the people around him. I don't know, to the people of that area. So one important person will come out of them later on.
Okay, that's another acceptable thought. Any other thoughts?
Because they were on the way to destroy Kaaba.
Because they were destroying the Kaaba. So the protection of Allah was for the Kaaba or for the people of Mecca?
Kaaba.
What was the goal of Abraha? He came to kill the people of Mecca or to destroy the Kaaba? His main target was the Kaaba, right? So this protection or this miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused to happen was for the bayt, for the house, or for the people who live there?
Just the house.
For the house. It wasn't mainly for the people who live there, right? Okay, maybe Allah did this for any reason related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is not for those people. It's actually for his house and for his Prophet. Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely.
How is that possible?
Because Allah knows that the Prophet is going to appear in a couple of years. So
It's actually the same year.
he
Yeah.
created the.
That was almost a couple months before his birth.
Yeah. So
Yes.
he created the platform that.
So that was maybe for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah.
In what sense? How can we say that was for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
So this is a kind of miracle. So the miracle and safeguard of Kaaba, Almighty Allah, His presence actually, towards the people of that area. So the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam should have the easy to the places.
So that was a kind of introduction
Kind of introduction.
to the fact that the Prophet is going to be born soon, right? That's why in Sirah there's something that they call the irhasat, the precursors that happen before the birth of the Prophet. Things that are not normal that happen to indicate that something big is going to happen soon. So if you believe in this concept, we might consider the incident of the elephant to be one of these things. Something big to happen to attract people's attentions. Maybe people wouldn't get it on the spot, but afterwards they can reflect, okay, now we understand why did this happen in the same year of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes.
So you know how like each time a prophet comes, the last prophet usually it's to kind of update their message. So it's the same message but to add more. Isn't Christianity the right religion until the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came? Like was a prophet?
Okay.
So Christianity was the right religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a church that Abraham made, right?
Yes.
That was a church.
Mhm. That's exactly the interesting part about it. You compare a church to a place that is surrounded with a lot of idols that people are literally worshiping. So by book, those people are in much more corrupt belief than those people who go to that church in general. I'm talking hypothetically. They were in more facade and corruption than in terms of their beliefs than the people who maybe would go, regardless of the goal of Abraham to build that church, but people going to churches in general, their belief system may be better than those people of the pagans. That's why the scholars had a lot of beautiful reflections on this, and the main part of it is they said it was not for the people of Mecca. Yes, they benefited from this incident 100%, but it was not mainly for them. It was for the house of Allah, that's number one. And it was for the Prophet ﷺ, that's number two, because that's again an introduction, a precursor that the Prophet ﷺ is coming. It's an irhas, as we call it. That the birth of the Prophet ﷺ is coming soon. And actually, and the point of the oppression, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would destruct and punish the oppressors, that's actually a good point too. One of the reflections that was mentioned about this point by Imam al-Razi rahimahullah, he said this people of Mecca, their problem was more towards Allah. So the dhulm they had, the oppression they had, was more like a spiritual oppression, the way they viewed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the oppression that Abraham had was more against people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive for things that go towards his rights. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect people. This out of his mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would care more about people's rights more than things that like directly belong to him. So these people are saying bad stuff about Allah, it's okay. But those people are oppressing others. They want to kill others. They want to destruct a house. They will have to kill people, innocent people there. Allah would actually destruct and punish those people over those people who are in a worse relationship with him. And this is one of the most beautiful reflections and this point of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused the ruin or the destruction of the Abraham's army over the people of Mecca at that time. That's why when Imam al-Razi said we have a similar theory to this in fiqh and in Islam. Because the fact that a person is a non-Muslim, he is still protected, his soul is still preserved, you have no right to violate his soul. But if a Muslim and he's committed a crime, and this crime is state that this person has to be killed, you still kill him, even if he's a Muslim. His faith wouldn't prevent him from getting that penalty, that he has to be killed because he killed someone, for example. So the concept of the oppression and the dhulm and the corruption, when it comes to violate people's rights, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would sometimes weigh over people who would violate their rights, their spiritual rights towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this story in the Quran, which gives more to the significance of the situation. And the chapter, as we said, it's called Surah Al-Fil, the chapter of the elephant. We all memorize this surah, right? We all know this surah. What is the first ayah of the surah? I didn't hear anything. So what is the first ayah? أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. What does it mean, أَلَمْ تَرَ? Literally it means, have you seen? Right? Have you seen what your Lord did to the people of the elephant? Okay, he was not born yet. Why is he telling him this? So when you say أَلَمْ تَرَ, تَرَ means literally see. So you tell him, have you seen what your Lord has done to the people of the elephant? This is the literal translation of the surah, of the ayah. So he was not born to see. So why did he ask him that question?
Do you know? Like when you say you see me, do you know that?
So it's a metaphorical sense.
Yeah.
That have you seen, like have you heard, right?
Have you heard?
That this happens in the Quran. The Quran uses this word about the Day of Judgment. Not just that, he would use it about very old incidents in history. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Thousands and thousands of years ago, you would tell him, have you seen what your Lord has done to Ad? It's not only about using a metaphor, by the way. It's about telling him it happened as if you can see it. It's an emphasis that this 100% happened. And it's an indication that this was reported by Tawatur, by the way. If the Quran is telling the Prophet this in a time that there are still people living when the surah was revealed who maybe have witnessed this, by the way. Because that was like, again, 50 years after the incident. So maybe there are people around the Prophet ﷺ who witnessed the incident in the field. If Allah says, have you seen what happened? Maybe that means, or that implies, that nobody actually in the side is denying the incident. So it happened. Because if people would deny it, you would tell the Prophet the Quran is lying because we were living 50 years ago and this didn't happen. But nobody ever in the entire Meccan society denied this surah to the Prophet ﷺ. An incident big like this, army of thousands and thousands of people who were destroyed near the Haram, of course everybody there would hear about this story, right? So the fact that nobody denied the existence of this story means it happened 100%. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, Alam tara kayfa? Have you seen? Because it already happened. This is one of the reflections on this ayah. A second reflection on this ayah, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil? Have you noticed that that's a miracle that happened before the birth of a prophet? It's a miracle, right? 100%. That's not normal. There's no birds who just carry stones and kill people like this, right? It's a miracle. But we always talk about miracles to be things that happened to a prophet. He was not born yet, but it did happen before the prophet. That's why the scholars of Aqidah derive from this ayah that the mu'jizah might happen even before the advent, not only before the advent of the da'wah, before the birth of a prophet. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would offer a mu'jizah. A third reflection, Imam al-Razi made a beautiful reflection of this ayah. He said this ayah, or this surah in general, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ, he said it hits hard on the argument with the atheism. Why? He said because most of the natural phenomena that happen on earth, the Dahriyin, or they used to call them the Dahriyin, which is one sort of atheism at that time, during the time of Imam al-Razi. They used to explain all the natural phenomena, especially the natural disasters that happen to people, by natural laws and physics. So they said this one, there is no way to explain it. Right? Said there is no way you can naturally explain why a group of birds go to a certain place and carry 3 stones each one, and they would kill some people and leave other people because they were in an area that other residents were living there, right? Why didn't they hit other people by mistake if it just was a natural thing? That means it's something that is very, very like beyond all the laws of physics and natural laws that we know. While in the same time, everybody has heard of this story, so it happened already. So they cannot deny the historical authenticity of this story. At the same time, they cannot provide any natural explanation. Why did this happen? That's why he said, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ قِصَّةَ الْفِيلِ وَاقِعَةٌ عَلَى الْمُلْحِدِينَ جِدًّا. His expression was nice. He said, all the atheists, they would have a big, hard time with this ayah to disprove it because it's something that they all witnessed during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So all these reflections on one ayah. One more reflection. He said, have you seen what your Lord has done to the people of the elephant? أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ. He made it in a singular form. He's talking only to the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't say Allah, he didn't say Rabbukum, your Lord, in the plural form. He said your own Lord. He's talking to the Prophet ﷺ. And you can derive a lot of indications from this. Number one, you can get the sense that we talked about a while ago that there was something special for the Prophet in this incident. Right? He's mentioning his favor and him by singling him out, telling him this story. So that wasn't a specific honor by what happened to the Prophet ﷺ. Maybe there's an indication that I've protected the house for you. Right? Maybe this is one of the indications. And maybe there's an indication that I protected the house for you and this house now on belongs to you because you are the final prophet. So whatever way you are going to tell people how to respect and deal with this house, you are the one who have this authority. So you are the one who would tell them how to make Hajj. And you are the one who would tell them how to perform Umrah. All this you can, maybe that's a possible derivation from the ayah. That was for you, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعْلَ رَبُّكَ, your own Lord. And there is another maybe universal concept or an historical concept too that can support this concept. There were other attempts after that of people who came to cause damage to the Kaaba and Allah didn't punish them. Actually, more interestingly, some Muslims tried to destruct the Kaaba and there was no punishment for this. During the time of Al-Hajjaj, regardless of the controversy about the period of time, he invaded the Kaaba. He was a Muslim ruler and he did a lot of good things to Islam, by the way. But he invaded the Kaaba for a political reason and he wanted to kill Abdullah ibn Zubayr because there was a fight over the Khilafah at the time. He invaded it literally. He actually bombed in their way of bombing. He bombed the Kaaba and the Haram at the time. Nothing happened to him. Nothing happened to the army. They're all Muslims. Nothing happened to them. But those people who came before Islam, everybody was not Muslim. There wasn't even a prophet yet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't punish them. All these might be, I'm saying all these suggested indications, I'm not saying that's an absolute right opinion, but indications that there was a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did this at that time during the same year of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One other spiritual reflection from the surah, one of the scholars made. He said, it's as if Allah is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this house, the Kaaba, is the qibla for your own prayer. And your heart is the qibla for your own knowledge of me. Right? We talked in the last course about spirituality. The heart is the king of the body, right? So the house is the actual physical qibla of your rituals, and your heart is the qibla of your ma'rifah, of your knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've protected the house of the salah, I protected the qibla of the salah, you protect the qibla of your spirituality. He said, it's as if he's telling him, I've taken care of the actual house that people pray to. You need to take care of your own heart and to keep that sound spiritual relationship with me. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, it's a beautiful surah, أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. What is the following surah? Going towards Surah An-Nas. Surah Quraysh. Right? What is the first ayah of the surah? MashaAllah. لإيلاف قريش. Okay, good. لإيلاف قريش. What does it mean, لإيلاف قريش? It's interesting. Sorry, 1 second. It's interesting that li, it means for. So that's the first ayah in the surah that starts for the sake of such and such, which is interesting because there was nothing mentioned before that. So there has to be something that is not mentioned or something that has to do with the surah before. Right? Because you cannot just say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim li'ila Quraysh. For the sake, so li'ila Quraysh means for the sake of security of Quraysh. What did happen? We didn't know what happened to start the surah like this. Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, say thousands of Quraysh, li'ila Quraysh.
No, it's not alf. It's li'ilaf. It's one word, ilaf, from ulfa, from ilaf, from getting people together, from securing people, or from for the taming of Quraysh, as they translate it, for the security of Quraysh. This is the actual translation. So how can a surah start with this, for the taming of Quraysh? And he didn't explain afterwards. He said, ilafihim. He's confirming the same thing. For this security again. That's a kind of a literal translation. And then he said, رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ, the winter and summer journeys. So how can you understand the surah if you single the surah out and you try to read it? What does it mean for the security of Quraysh? So one of the suggested opinions is that it's related to the surah before, which means I've protected the house for the security of Quraysh. This is one of the possible opinions. But why would he do that? To tell them, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. So let them worship the Lord of that house. And they said this ayah is one of the dalil that it's connected with the previous surah, because هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, this house, it was not mentioned before. And if you use the word this, it has to be mentioned about something that you just mentioned. Yes, but it was mentioned in the surah before. Which means فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي حَمَاهُ اللَّهُ. Let them worship the Lord of this house that Allah has protected, which the story was mentioned in the previous surah. So there is a connection between these two chapters in the Quran. So I'm having a little homework for all of you. So number one, if you do not memorize these two chapters, we'll make sure you memorize them. Okay? And you will be tested about this. So it's not just like self-wajib. It's something that is going to be supervised. The second thing, so the other part of the homework, pick any tafsir you like and read the tafsir of these two chapters. I'm not going to recommend a certain tafsir. Whatever tafsir you like, of the famous recommended tafsir, of course, in whatever language you're more comfortable with. It's too short surah. It's short, like 5-6 verses. You read in general the tafsir, the meanings of the words, because some of the words are a little bit difficult. And then this number two, you read about the tafsir of the two chapters. After the incident of the elephant, now Abdul Muttalib is one of the very well respected people during that time, and he had 10 kids, boys and girls. One of them is Abdullah. Who is Abdullah? The father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was one of the best among his kids. One of the best in manners, one of the best in character, one of the most chaste. قالوا من أعفهم. He was very chaste and very respectful person. And he was one of the closest to his dad, Abdullah. And then if you remember the story of digging the well of Zamzam, when he felt so bad and so down, and he made that vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if Allah gives me 10 kids, I will slaughter one of them for his sake. So Allah gave him 10 kids. He got married after that, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the 10 kids. After they grew up and became adults, he gathered all of them, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather, and he divulged to them basically his secret vow that he made for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I've made this vow a long time ago, I now need to be up to my word, and I'm going to slaughter one of you. And they all accepted. And again, this has something to do with what we talked last time about the way the society was basically built that time, the mentality of the Arabs at that time. So he wanted to do that, so he has to draw kind of a lot, right? Because he kind of just like point out to one of them and said, you're the one who's going to be slaughtered or sacrificed. So he has to make a kind of a qur'ah. So one of the ways of making that lot of qur'ah at that time, he wrote down all the names on what they call divination arrows, al-aqdah. And then he gave it to the guardian of their most beloved goddess, which is Hubal, that one of the biggest idols around the Kaaba. There's a guardian, a person, that's his job. He's taking care of basically the idol. You remember last time we said there was a man who was the first one to introduce idol worship in Mecca. Do you remember his name? The first one that introduced idol worship in Mecca. Yes? Luhay. That was from the notes, right? Okay. So this is the first one who introduced this concept of idol worship. So we said if you remember the story, he brought this Hubal god from Sham, and he brought it. So they had a guy, his main responsibility, his main job is to take care of Hubal. So he gave these arrows, divination arrows, to the guardian of Hubal to pick one of them. So the arrows would be shuffled basically, and one of them would be drawn. So the arrow that he picked, it pointed out to Abdullah to be slaughtered. He felt a little bit bad, but that's the way it works. He has to slaughter him. So he basically took him and he went to the Mecca, to the Kaaba, in front of the Kaaba. He said, I'm going to slaughter one of them in front of the Kaaba. And he went and he took his razor or knife to slaughter him. So people of Quraysh gathered and said, like, are you crazy? Are you going to slaughter your best kid? Specifically the uncles of the kid from the mom's side, from a famous tribe that is called Bani Makhzum. And his father, Abu Talib, who would be the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ later, he said, like, you cannot kill him. So he said, كيف أصنع بنذري? What can I do to my vow? They know all of them that he has to do something. You cannot just say, okay, that's fine. They can't. And again, those people that have no divine religion. But he made a vow to Allah because they had a certain way of believing in God. He said, I have to do something for my vow. So they suggested that he would go to a she diviner, as they call her, Arrafa, and she would judge about that. She would give you a better opinion. So she actually suggested something that is a little bit smart. She said, you do this lot, or you do this divination arrows between Abdullah and 10 camels, and try again. If the arrow points out to the camels, slaughter the camels, distribute them over the poor people, and you're good, and you saved Abdullah. Okay, what if the arrow comes back to point out to Abdullah? She said, okay, don't slaughter him. Keep repeating doing this again. And each time you add 10 camels. So he liked the idea and he did that. So the first time it was Abdullah. So he added 10 camels. Second time it was Abdullah. He had 10 camels. Third time Abdullah, he had 10 camels. All the way to 90 camels. And then he said, that has to be the last time. The 10th time it was the camels. So it became 100 camels. And he really did that. He slaughtered 100 camels and he saved his son. And they said he slaughtered them, he put them in public, he would never prevent anyone from eating from them. Not just anyone, he said he left it for all people and animals. He said, لا يرد عنها إنسانا ولا سبعا. He said, whatever wants to eat from that, an animal or a person, you just take. You imagine 100 camels, how much is the meat that would come from that. And one interesting thing about this story, by the way, have you heard before about the blood money? Ad-diya in Arabic language. So what is the blood money? It's in the Quran. Blood money, yeah.
Diya?
Ad-diya, yes. So what is ad-diya? If you kill a person by accident, what is the penalty? Like a car accident, for example, and you hit someone and he died. There is a penalty in Islam about this, right? The main penalty about this is you pay money. And you pay money for the family or the heirs of that person. How much you have to pay as a diya per person?
100 camels.
100 camels. This is the blood money.
Yeah.
So because the interesting thing about the story of Abdullah and his dad, before this incident, the Arabs used to pay 10 camels as a diya, as a blood money. After that, they liked what happened. They said, you know what, we're gonna make 100. And more beautiful, the Quran actually approved this and made it 100. It's not only before Islam. When Islam came, when the Prophet ﷺ came, he approved the 100. It's the same price that people used to pay before Islam. It's still the same price that people has to pay. If you kill a person by accident, by mistake, you actually, only by mistake of course, not intentional, you pay this diya. And the beautiful thing about that in Islam is that it's not one person who pays it, the entire family pays it, by the way. And you would say like, okay, it's not their mistake. That's the hukum. Because it's a social responsibility that the society has to prevent people from being very reckless. So if I'm a member of my family and I did this, there is a kind of responsibility over my family the way they raised me. So my entire family has to come together and pay this money. They say al-aqila, which means the family. The family has to pay the diya, not only one person. And they have to pay. There's no way that you cannot pay it. This is one of the reflections on this story. The second thing, the beautiful reflection, is that the Prophet ﷺ used to say, "Ana ibn al-dhabihayn." He said, "I'm the offspring of the slaughter too." So who are those two that he's referencing? Ismail and Abdullah, his own dad. You know what happened to Ismail and Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam? This is the first dhabih, the slaughtered one. The second one is Abdullah, the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After that incident, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather, he wanted to marry off his son, and he chose which became the mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's her name? Amina bintu Wahb, from a very big family in Mecca, from one of the most respectful families in Mecca. Her dad was the master of Banu Zuhra, one of the very big tribes of Arab. She was a very reputable woman, very famous, very honorable woman. So in the light of that ancestral lineage that she had, Abdul Muttalib basically recommended her for his son Abdullah, and they got married in Mecca. Very short time later, after the marriage, Abdul Muttalib sent his son Abdullah to Medina to buy some dates. And on that journey, he died. Very, very short time after the marriage of Amina. The other narration says he went actually to Ash-Sham in a trade caravan with the Arabs, with the Quraysh at that time, and then on the way back he died. Generally, he died almost about when he was 25 years old. And that was, according to most of the historians, before the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. When the people of Mecca heard of that, they felt so bad because he was a very reputable and respectful person. His wife Amina, she felt so sad for the loss of her husband. She actually wrote very beautiful poetry about her loss of her husband. We call that ritha. One of the genres of poetry in Arabic. You know, there are multiple genres of poetry. Like you praise someone, you call it madh. You dispraise someone, you call it hijab. Someone who died and you want to offer a kind of, you call it in English elegy, that you want to talk about that how good and how honorable this person was. We call it ritha in Arabic language. So she wrote some ritha about her husband Abdullah. All what he left after he died was only 5 camels and few sheep. That was in his estate or his inheritance. 5 camels and few sheep. And a black slave woman, her name was Baraka, and her actual kunya was Ayman, who became a dry nurse for the Prophet ﷺ later. Hadinatu Rasulillah ﷺ, like a nursemaid for the Prophet ﷺ. And then that was the time when the Prophet ﷺ was born in the lane of Bani Hashim, Shi'b Bani Hashim in Mecca, morning of Monday, the 9th or the 12th, according to the famous opinions of Rabi' al-Awwal, in that same year of the incident of the elephant. And that was about 22nd of April, 571. That was the date of the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. We'll take a 5-minute break, inshallah, and then we'll continue for a bit after, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So now we came to the point of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. as I said, in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, that year of the Amul Fil, as we call it, the incident of the elephant. It was reported that Sayyidah Amina, the mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said, when I was given birth to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I saw that like a light coming out from my body that lit the palaces of Syria. And they consider this narration to be one of the evidences on the concept of the, as we said, the irhasat, or the precursors that happened before the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The books of Sirah have multiple stuff like this about these irhasat. Again, irhasat is a sign that the Prophet is going to be born soon. They mentioned, for example, that 14 galleries of the Kisra's palace, which is the main palace for the Persian Empire at that time, they cracked and rolled down. The magician's sacred fire, because we know the magicians, they worship the fire, the Majus. They said the fire actually died down on this day, which it never happened to that fire before. Some of the churches and the Sawa lake, one of the very famous lakes in Iraq at that time, which is very big for the Persian Empire at that time, some of the churches around this lake actually collapsed and were destroyed at that time. There is some sort of controversy about these stories. Some scholars said we do not have really authentic evidences for the authenticity of these stories, but they're still very famous. A lot of scholars and a lot of historians actually reported this. Maybe not with the best chains of narrators, but they said it's widely known and accepted by a lot of the seerah and scholars of history. And even in the poetry and the chanting poetry that scholars would write, and nasheed and songs about the Prophet ﷺ, they would always mention these things. Imam al-Busiri, in the famous poem of Al-Burda, he said, أبانا مولده عن طيب عنصره يا طيب مبتدأ منه ومختتم. He had a full chapter in his long poem. He had a long poem on the Prophet ﷺ in 160 verses. It's very famous. A lot of people actually, a lot of the munshideen, they sing it a lot. مولاي صلي وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. So one chapter of this poem was on the precursors that happened before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he was born, his dad is not there. So the mom sent the baby to his grandfather Abdul Muttalib to give him the glad tidings of the birth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She didn't name him yet, but to give him the glad tidings of the boy. So he got so happy. He took the baby and he went to the haram and he made dua to Allah, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving him this. And he named him Muhammad. And this name was not common among the Arabs, by the way. It was a kind of a new name. Nobody was named Muhammad during that time. But he gave him that name. And one narration said, he was asked, why did you give him that name? He said, لِيُحْمَدَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفِي السَّمَاءِ. Muhammad means praised, right? From hamd, somebody who's praised. He said, I want him to be praised here on earth and even in the heavens. And the first woman who suckled the Prophet ﷺ and breastfed him after his mom, of course, 1 week after his mom, was a mawla, like a servant. Her name was Thuwayba. She's a woman who was serving one of his uncles, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this woman was a servant of someone that might be a surprise to most of you. She was the servant of Abu Lahab. And he was so happy, and he offered her to breastfeed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you know what this man did to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after he became a prophet, 40 years from this incident. But that was one of the good things that basically he offered the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A beautiful reflection on this. They said this woman, when she heard the Prophet was born, Thuwayba, the servant, she ran to her master, who was Abu Lahab at the time. She was so happy, telling him like Amina, because he's one of the uncles of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Said Amina has just given birth to a beautiful baby. So he got so happy for this, and he set her free out of his happiness for the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you know what happened again? Abu Lahab is the man that Allah said he's gonna be in the hellfire, he and his wife. Right? Which surah is this? Al-Masad. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised him in the Quran in a very harsh way. They said, it's a story that's authentic. They said when he died, after he died, somebody saw him in a dream. And he asked him, how are you doing? What's your situation now? He expressed that he's in a great pain and a severe punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, except for one little thing, good thing that is happening to me here. He said, every Monday, the punishment will be a little bit less. And he said, this is only because this is the day that he showed happiness for the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored his happiness and joy that he felt way before the Prophet became a prophet. For the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the scholars of hadith, his name is Al-Hafidh Shamsuddin al-Dimashqi. He wrote a couple of poetry about this in a very beautiful way. He said, إذا كان هذا كافرا جاء ذمه وتبت يداه في الجحيم مخلدا. He said, this person is a kafir. He didn't believe in Allah. He was a very harsh enemy against the Prophet. And Allah mentioned in the Quran that he will be eternally in the hellfire. He said, if he is that bad man, and we have an authentic narration that on Mondays, Allah would alleviate the pain of his punishment. He said, أتى أنه في يوم الاثنين دائما يخفف عنه للسرور بأحمد. He said, Allah would alleviate his pain on Mondays only because of his happiness for the Prophet ﷺ. So this Imam said, how about us who live all of our life loving the Prophet ﷺ? He said, فَمَا الظَّنُّ بِالْعَبْدِ الَّذِي طُولَ عُمْرِهِ بِأَحْمَدَ مَسْرُورًا وَمَاتَ مُوَحِّدًا. He said, how would Allah ﷺ do to a person who lived all of his life happy with the Prophet ﷺ and believes in Allah and Tawheed? He's showing hope and raja, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you are that merciful to a kafir who was so bad to your own Prophet, we are hoping and seeking we are actually, like we have that tama, literally like we are greedy about your mercy and forgiveness. So this woman, his servant, was the first one to suckle the Prophet ﷺ. And then during the babyhood of the Prophet ﷺ, his family did something that was one of the very famous customs of the Arabs at that time. They would send their kids to the Bedouin wet nurses, and they would like their kids to be raised in the first few years of their life there. So Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, he decided to do the same thing, and he started to look for a wet nurse for the Prophet ﷺ, until he found someone, the actual full-time wet nurse of the Prophet ﷺ. What was her name? Halimatu as-Sa'diyya. That's the attribution of her tribe or her family. The Prophet ﷺ had several foster brothers, by the way. Had several ikhwatum min al-rada'a. One of them is a person, his name Abdullah ibn al-Harith and Anisatu bint al-Harith, two siblings who were basically being breastfed by Halima. Another woman, her name was Hudhatha or Judama, two different ways of the actual name, the way it was reported, bint al-Harith, which was after that famous to be known as Shayma. Was a laqab, one of her names, not like kind of a nickname was Shayma. And then later, because she was older than the Prophet, she used to be a dry nurse for the Prophet. كانت حاضنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So in Arabic we have murdi'a and hadina. We have the wet nurse, the actual murdi'a, and the dry nurse, the person who just like a kind of a babysitter or nanny for the kids. One of his foster brothers is Abu Sufyan, who is like one of the cousins of the Prophet ﷺ, and he caused him a very hard time, but then he embraced Islam later after the conquest of Mecca. Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. Actually, Thuwayba, the servant of Abu Lahab, she breastfed him. And Halima also did that for a little bit. So he used to attribute himself as being a foster brother with the Prophet ﷺ from two different women, which was a kind of an honor that he had after that. The traditions talk a lot about how the Prophet ﷺ was a blessed kid, and how Halima she found out a lot about the blessings of the Prophet ﷺ, and how the entire household and the clan or the family of Halima and her husband, they witnessed a lot of barakat and blessings of the Prophet ﷺ being under her care. She narrated the full story. She said, I left from my little town, my small town, with my husband Al-Harith, and we went with a group of women to Mecca to look for people if they want to hire basically wet nurses. So they said that was in a year of drought and famine, that we had nothing to eat. We were in a very miserable situation. She said, I rode on a small she donkey, was a brown, and we had another old she camel that had nothing to offer. The camel was so dry, there's no milk. And then they said, we couldn't sleep the entire night because of how much the kid is. She had a baby, her own baby. For how much he's crying, we cannot sleep the entire night. He's crying all the time. I cannot breastfeed him because I do not have milk. And even the camel that we have doesn't have milk too. So I had nothing to feed that baby with. And he just cried. She said, all what we did, كُنَّا نَرْجُو الْغَيْثِ. We just like making like supplication that Allah would give us immediate relief for this. So we reached Mecca with a group of women. Every woman would just knock the houses, knock the doors, saying like, if you want your kid to be nursed in our area, we can take it. They said every single woman the Prophet ﷺ was offered to her to take, she would refuse right after she realizes that he's an orphan. Because the woman would say like, okay, we're not gonna get really paid well. And his grandfather wouldn't be that generous. If he has a father, that means the father would actually spend much more money than a grandfather. They said all the women refused the Prophet ﷺ. And that, subhanAllah, that was their qadr. And he herself kind of refused at the beginning. She kept trying to find someone else. And then she said, until I found that every single woman had a baby except for me. So I told my husband, you know what, they just take this kid. They just take him. I don't like that going back with no one. They just take him and maybe, you never know, maybe he would be a good kid. And he said, yeah, you know what, that's right. They just take him and go. So I took him and I went back to the group before leaving to their area. She said, I put him in my lab and I tried to breastfeed him. And I found a lot of milk is coming out of me. And that was to my surprise. I couldn't believe it. I actually fed him and his basically foster brother who is her own kid fully until they both slept, and that kid didn't sleep for a very long time. So I was surprised, and I told my husband we didn't get a good sleep for a very long time. And before we left, my husband went to that camel that she just said the camel was so dry. He tried to milk the camel. He got a lot of milk from the camel. And that was a great surprise for them both. And she said we had the best night ever after we found that things are actually going well. And then when we woke up, my husband told me, Ya Halima, wallahi laqad akhadti nasmatan mubarakah. Said, wallahi, this kid is a blessed kid. There is something like not normal happening here. And she said, I hope that will be the case. Said the donkey I was riding on the way here was a very lean donkey, would barely move. On the way back, it's running like a horse. And all the women with me are telling me like, just please slow down. We cannot get to that pace that you take. And she says like everything just was not quite normal after I took the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they said, they used to tell me like, is this the same donkey you came with? Are you sure that's the same donkey that you're riding on the way here? They said even people around us, they started noticing that something is not normal happening. They said when we came back to our city, our like area that is called Biladu Bani Sa'd, the area this tribe was living in was in the desert. She said, Wallahi ma a'lamu ardan min ardillahi ajdaba minha. Said the most barren, droughtful ground I've ever seen in my life before when we left. Said once we got back there, we would send our sheep to graze. And every time they go, they found a lot of grass. Until people are shocked, like there is no grass in that area, the sheep are dying out of hunger. Until people started telling each other, you know what, go graze in the same area that Halima goes to. Like say, like send your sheep to wherever Halima is going. Said they would go with us, the sheep, our sheep will come back full and the rest did not. Just like that. Remember last time at the introduction we talked about the ghaib and the iman of the metaphysics and the iman of the unseen. If you have problems with this, you wouldn't really be easily grasp or basically digest these different things, because we believe in blessings and we believe in barakah. That was a barakah for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's actually nothing compared to the position of the Prophet sallallahu, and it's nothing compared to, of course, the power, of course, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She said, فَلَمْ نَزَلْ نَتَعَرَّفْ مِنَ اللَّهِ الزِّيَادَةَ وَالْخَيْرِ حَتَّى مَضَتْ سَنَتَاهُ وَفَصَلْنَا. Said, we've been in growing blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and khayr until 2 years passed and we weaned him after that. And she said also, وَكَانَ يَشِبُّ شَبَابًا لَا يَشِبُّهُ الْغِلْمَانِ. Said like, he was grown up so fast, he's getting mature so fast, like in a way that is not normal as the rest of the kids. And then after the 2 years, now we have to return him back to his mom. Said we took him back and we are so sad. We wish if the mom would allow us to take him back with us for a little more. So she said we took him back to his mom and then we tried to convince her, telling her, you know what, he will be better staying with us there. We want him to be away from big cities. We don't want him to catch any kind of infection from the Mecca. They just keep him a couple more years with us. I kept persistently doing that until I convinced her. So I took him back with us, and she was so happy when her and her husband took him back to her town. And then around 2 years later, the situation, when he was almost 4 years old, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it happened, the incident that is very authentic in the Sunnah, when the angel Jibreel alayhi salam came down and he ripped off the chest of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He opened it and he took out the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And again, that's something that has to do with ghaib and has to do with the mu'jizat. And he extracted the blood clots from the body of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he said, this is the part of the shaitan in you. هذا حظ الشيطان منك. Then he took the heart and in a golden basin he washed the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. There were some little kids who watched this, by the way. And they washed the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then he put the heart back in his body. He joined the body with the heart back together in its place. The boys and the playmates of the Prophet ﷺ, they started shouting out to her mom, to her nurse, saying Muhammad was murdered. So she was panicking, and she thought that he was kidnapped and killed. And she felt so scared. And she decided to return him back to his mom, because she didn't understand what's going on, but she said, you know what, there's something wrong about this kid, we have to return him back, because she didn't want to take that responsibility of the Prophet ﷺ. Anas ibn Malik, he said way later, he was very young, he wasn't living at that time. He said after the Prophet ﷺ was like towards the end of his life, because he was his very close servant, he said, I saw the signs of this kind of surgery on the chest of the Prophet ﷺ once. Said, I can see some sort of threads that was in the chest of the Prophet ﷺ. So she took him back to his mom, and she lived with her mom until he was 6 years old. Then when he was 6, his mom decided to visit the grave of her husband in respect to the memory of her late husband, Abdullah. That was in Medina, and that was called Yathrib at that time, before, of course, the Hijrah. So she went on that trip over 500 kilometers. She took the baby, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with her. And she took her servant, Ayman, who said one of the dry nurses of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he took her father-in-law, Abdul Muttalib. She spent like 1 month there, that after visiting the grave, on the way back, she got so sick and she died. And then she was buried there. Way later, just pause in this scene, and like years later, the Prophet ﷺ, once after the Hijrah, and after a lot of battles, after the Islam was a little bit widespread among people, he felt he's missing his mom so much, and he went to visit her grave. His mom died and he was 6 years old. She didn't know anything about him. She was not a witness of the Islam. So the Sahaba said, we saw the Prophet ﷺ visiting his mom, and they said, we've never seen him crying like this before. فلم يرى صلى الله عليه وسلم أكثر باكيا منه. He was an orphan, and that's something that is very unique about his character. He didn't have a dad. He was born and his dad has passed away, and he lost his mom and he was 6 years old. صلى الله عليه وسلم. So, who took his custody after his mom? Who? His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. He took him. He loved him so much. He used to have a kind of a special mattress in front of the Kaaba that he would sit on. All the sons of Abdul Muttalib, they don't dare to sit on this mattress. When they go there, even if he's absent, they would sit around this mattress, but they cannot sit on the mattress of Abdul Muttalib, except for the Prophet ﷺ, who is maybe the youngest. He would go and sit there. People will come and say, like, get out of here because you cannot sit here. He would come and say, like, leave him alone. This is the only one who's allowed to sit here. And he would sit next to him and he would pat him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and say, دعوا ابني فوالله إن له لشأنا. He said, like, just leave my son alone. He will be in a significant position in the future. 2 years after that, he was 8 years old, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. 8 years, 2 months, his grandfather died. And before he died, he made as part of his will that the one who takes custody of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would be his uncle Abu Talib. And he took care of him almost 40 years after this. He was the main support of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One day, when he took his custody, it was a time when Mecca was in a rainless year, and you know they were living in a desert, and they used to face a lot of troubles and problems with the rain, and they needed rain. That's one of the main sources of water. So they كانوا في قحط, in a rainfall, in a rainless year. So Quraysh went to Abu Talib, one of their noblemen, and they said, like, the valley has become leafless, and the children are so hungry. Let us pray for the rainfall. By the way, they used to do that, and we have that in Islam too, right? One of the recommended prayers we mentioned in the fiqh class last time is Salatul Istisqa, the rainfall prayer that you make dua to Allah. So you make it's a full prayer of a khutbah and a certain way of doing it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you rain. So they said he went out. People have to go out in public, in a very public space, in a roofless place, and they have to show tara'a and humbleness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, we saw Abu Talib going out, and he took his nephew with him, the baby, or like the little kid, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we saw him going out with a young, beautiful boy. This narration, it says like that. He was beautiful as the sun, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there was a kind of a black cloud that is shadowing, or that is basically like over the head of this sun, over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he took him and he stood with his son in his hands right in front of the wall of the Kaaba. And then he started making dua for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him rain. He said once he started, and the kid is holding the hands of his uncle, it started raining a lot of rain, a lot of matar. He said immediately a lot of clouds, they came from all directions, they gathered over our valleys, and they just started giving us rain, and a lot of khayran and barakah came out from this rain. That's why he said that, Abu Talib, in one of his beautiful poetry, he said, وَأَبْيَضَ يُسْتَسْقَى الْغَمَامُ بِوَجْهِهِ. He was praising the Prophet ﷺ. He said he's a white, beautiful boy that we get and we are granted rain and matar because of his beautiful face. وَأَبْيَضَ يُسْتَسْقَى الْغَمَامُ بِوَجْهِهِ ثِمَالُ الْيَتَامَى عِصْمَةٌ لِلْأَرَامِلِ. He said in the same time he had beautiful characters, that he is in a great support for the orphans and for the widows. So he linked between the beauty of his body, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the beauty of his characters and manners. This verse of poetry that said in that very old time, way later in the Medina, one time the Prophet ﷺ made dua, or led Salatul Istisqa once, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant people in Medina a lot of matar. And one of the Sahaba, he smiled and he said, when I saw the Prophet ﷺ making dua and I'm seeing the clouds are coming to bring matar, I remembered Abu Talib on this day when he said, وَأَبْيَضَ يُسْتَسْقَى الْغَمَامُ بِوَجْهِهِ. It became one of the very famous, beautiful verses of poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ in a long poem that Abu Talib wrote about the Prophet ﷺ. ثِمَالُ الْيَتَامَى عِصْمَةٌ لِلْأَرَامِلِ. The Prophet ﷺ never got support from any person like what he got from Abu Talib, in the most unique way ever. And he's one of the most interesting characters of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. For 40 years he's in full 100% support, but he didn't believe. And that was to a large extent that some people adopted the opinion that he embraced Islam. Some people in history, they couldn't believe that Abu Talib is not a Muslim. Said no way he would offer all this support, he would offer all these services, he would take all the risk on his own life and the lives of his family, and he is not a Muslim. And it's very interesting, and we'll talk more about Abu Talib in the next class, inshallah, that what made him not believe in the Prophet ﷺ. Although most of his words that he said about the Prophet ﷺ shows that he's almost a Muslim. He's defending him, he's defending his aqidah, he's defending his principles. He would tell him, don't ever compromise your principles. Don't ever give up. Don't ever let your cause down, your people down, that whoever embrace Islam. But at the same time, he would ask him like, okay, say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He wouldn't say it. Even when he was bedridden and he's just about to die in a few minutes, he begged him, my uncle, just say La ilaha illallah and I would intercede with Allah for you. He didn't make it. Because the people there, and that's one of the worst examples of peer pressure you see in your life. A guy who offered all of this in his life, he did righteous work maybe more than a lot of Muslims, but he still needs the tawheed. So because Abu Jahl and a couple other people were there, they kept telling him, no, die the way your ancestors died. If he just said a word, he would be saved 100%. But subhanallah, and Allah Ta'ala told the Prophet إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You do not guide whoever you like. It's not something that you're responsible for. There are a lot of reflections on the story of Abu Talib, and especially the story of his death, and inshallah we'll shed more light on it next time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. I'm reminding you again with homework of reading the tafsir of Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh, inshallah. This is, according to a lot of people, this is the actual place that the Prophet ﷺ was born. This is the building now. It's kind of a recent picture, of course, but this is the place of his birth, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to a lot of historic resources. That's actually not an actual picture, but it's a kind of a imaginative one of the way the Kaaba and the houses of Mecca were at that time, or close to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, were built and designed. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins and shortcomings, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His blessings and greetings and prayers upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.